the parallels that exist between the benefits of honey and the same benefits of ketosis. We'll go into that a little bit. We'll share the screen again, and we'll look at some pictures and some diagrams. But also, we're going to see that honey can be a huge benefit for people who are making the transition into ketosis from a glucose diet. And we'll talk about why that's the case. So if you know someone who's interested in doing keto, or if you've been out of ketosis for a long time, or if you're like Dad and you've had a stroke and trying to get back to ketosis, and you even have some brain challenges as well as some cholesterol challenges, we're going to see how the preparation using honey can predispose you to some of the benefits of ketosis, because they actually have some of the same ingredients. And when we put up some of our screen sharing, we'll show them and make them available. So I think that parallel was fascinating. So all of that can be helpful to you, to me, as well as appreciating the benefits that we'll be able to see just in general. So let's get to it. Let's do a little screen share. And let me see if I can pull this up. Oh, I got to share the screen before I do that. So I can see it, but you can't see it again. Okay, so I think we can all see this right here. Of course, we were just looking at the bees and appreciate some of the value of how hardworking they are. But here's one of the books I wanted to enlarge a little bit. Let's see if we can make this a little bigger. Can you all see this diagram? I'm hoping you can read that.
There's a zoom and a zoom out at the top bar there in the magnifying glass, if that's what you wanted, Dad.
Yeah, there you go. Is that a little better for you guys?
Yes.
Okay. What I wanted to draw your attention to is, first of all, to answer the question we asked earlier in the group, and I think some of you know the obvious answer is, can you stay in ketosis and have honey? Not in any meaningful way. That's the short answer, because it is a simple carb. It is made up of two different kinds of sugar. And in fact, we could say let's look at this right here, compound, just to share this technically with you. I think I could expand this. No.
Magnifying glass. There you go.
So if you look, you see honey is essentially sucrose, and it looks complicated, but basically you see two legs to that compound, and they're both represented by the left corner and the right corner. Sucrose is made up of glucose, which we know is simple sugar, and fructose is also a sugar found in many of the fruits, or as Dr. Fung says, fructose. I've heard it pronounced both ways, but I'm going with fructose, so whichever you prefer. But basically, this shows you the chemical makeup of it. And what's great about this is the honeybee breaks these two compounds, which are difficult for us to break down in our stomach, into these two different compounds. That allows them to be very stable. In fact, one article said honey could last in a natural state for 1,000 years. Can you imagine that? And then, of course, there's some myths that go back to finding honey in an Egyptian tomb over 3,000 years, but that's been debunked. But what I find interesting about the honey is, let's look at this. If you look in the middle of this diagram, you see where it says 1 pound of honey contains, it says 1,333 calories, but just notice some of the compounds besides those two sugars we spoke about: calcium, phosphorus, iron, niacin, vitamin C. And these contents vary considerably depending on whatever type of plant the bee gets the honey from. Notice what it says. Honey also contains vitamin A, beta carotene, a complex sections of all B vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin E, K, magnesium, sulfur, chlorine, potassium, iodine, et cetera, et cetera. You can read them all. And then it goes on to say what I find very interesting. Many of these substances in honey are so complex that they have yet to be identified. Honey has been found to possess antibiotic, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic, expectorant, antifungal, immune stimulating, anti-allergenic, laxative, anti-anemic, tonic properties. And here's a good one for you ladies as we get older: calcium absorption in the body. Honey increases that, and it is recommended during menopause to help prevent osteoporosis. And then it finally ends with, it is really helpful in stomach ulcerations. Now, how does all of this help us parallel with being in ketosis? I'm going to stop that share and get into this other aspect of it. Here's how it can help us. The honey in its raw honey, because there are lots of kinds of honey, and we're only going to deal with just the raw honey. Honey has a brain booster. I'm going to just focus on this right now. And it has what these phytonutrients, polyphenols, that improve the memory and act as a brain booster. Now, here's where they do the same thing that ketosis does. Notice this. Its constant use increases the production of BDNF, or you may have heard this associated with ketones, brain-derived neurotrophic factors. What does that mean? Brain-derived neurotrophic factors is one of the benefits of ketosis because it encourages a protein that helps us with, let me get this back again. Do you remember this diagram that we saw in a couple of weeks ago? That BDNF helps the communication between your neurotransmitter molecules, the synapse and the dendrites. Do you remember before we talked about Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia? They all get toxins in this synaptic cleft. So one neuron has a difficult time communicating with the other neuron in the brain. Things begin to shut down. Memory is not accessible. Thoughts are not processed properly. Honey has the same BDNF that the ketones produce in the brain to protect that communication arc in the synaptic cleft. Now, that is hugely important. There are only a few other things that come in its natural form that provide the brain with this kind of protection and maintenance. In fact, let's go over to look at this. The BDNF is a gene. It comes right from your DNA. And what that means is it gives instructions to how your brain operates. Honey contains this BDNF, and it stimulates and protects that protein, which gives instruction to your brain. That's the same thing that ketones do in your brain. So that is a wonderful way to begin the transition towards brain health that you would normally only associate with the ketones. That BDNF. In fact, if you look in the middle of this writing, I don't know if you can see it, this is from the National Library of Medicine. It mentions here the synapse can change and adapt over time in response to experience. Even stresses can change that. We talked about that. If you're under a lot of stress in your job or your life, if you've had chronic depression, if you've had a buildup of toxins, you really need this BDNF gene to give the instructions to the protein to protect those nerve cells in the brain. And that is one way that it parallels the ketones. Now let's go back to here. And okay, I'm not going to get to that other picture. Let's stop the share right now. Okay. I did want to bring up this other diagram. One of the, okay, oops, I'm sorry, guys. I'm just having technical. I got too many things I'm trying to share with y'all. Okay, you should be able to see this again. This little diagram that I have about the brain booster. Here's a couple of other things. I'll just read them real briefly, and then we'll get into another thing that parallels ketones. We see help with wound healing, the phytonutrients. These, again, help us with bacteria and fungal infections. One of the cool things about that is it has hydrogen peroxide in the honey, which is a natural bacteria fighting that we have and produce naturally, even from the liver. So that sort of complements that. Helps in wound healing, especially burns. You can mix honey with other compounds. I like to mix it with cayenne pepper to stimulate circulation in your feet, in your skin, and anywhere you have something where you'd like to stimulate blood flow. It's a nutrient-rich compound. As we mentioned here, it has things that we find in other rich sources of nutrients like the carotenoids and the bioflavonoids. Here's the thing that it can help us where it improves our digestion. And the way it does that is there's a bacteria that can build up in the opening of your stomach, the pylori bacteria, as mentioned here. There's a pyloric valve. I look at it as sort of like this cylinder that can constrict and open that connects to your small intestine, and it kills the bacteria that can backflush up from your intestines into your stomach. So that is really cool. That helps with digestion. Now, how does that connect to keto? Well, sometimes you may find people that cannot digest the cruciferous vegetables that we're interested in having in our diet in a ketogenic diet. And that can be from a number of reasons. One is the microbiome is unhealthy, which the honey will feed prebiotics to the flora in the gut to help keep it healthy, but it will also kill this bacteria that causes ulcerations and can cause leaky gut syndrome and affect the digestion of the cruciferous vegetables. So once again, there is a correlation between honey and effective keto diet. Mentioned skin treatments. As we said, burns, lots of enzymes in the raw honey to keep it holds and retains water. So that helps your skin stay moist. Same thing with the hair. It has huge benefits to making your hair look fuller. Oh, these are kind of cool, not related to keto, but nice. Now, here's something related to keto. Notice what it says under instant energy source. I'm not so much concerned with that because if you're doing ketones, you've got plenty of energy. You don't need the extra boost of sugar from honey. But notice the blue print at the end of this paragraph here. The honey can help regulate blood cholesterol levels by lowering the bad or the LDL cholesterol and raising the good. That's the same thing that the ketogenic diet can do. So if a person is making a transition into ketones and they're removing sugar, but they still need a little sweets, they can use honey and they will begin to set up their cholesterol to be fat burning. They will help their LDL as well as raise the HDL cholesterol. It mentions here there's reasons for treating insomnia with it, another benefit. And of course, there's many more. If you did some homework, you could find. We won't go into why that's the case. Again, I don't recommend having honey in your tea before you go to sleep. Ketogenic diet is also a huge help in that. But again, it could be helpful as you make the transition. Let's go to 14, anti-cancerous properties. Again, this is similar to ketosis. It has those anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and antiviral properties. It helps to relieve oxidative stress. Do you know what oxidative stress is? Oxidative stress is best typified by if you cut an apple and you left it on your counter, what would happen to the apple and the flesh of the apple? It would oxidize. Oxygen would react. It would begin to decay. It would get brown. Well, within your cells, once the oxygen balance goes off, there is an oxidative stress that causes the mitochondria and the cell to be under or imbalanced. And so that oxidative stress can eventually even turn into cancer or free radicals, compromising the immune system. Keto helps that. and so does honey. One thing that becomes very obvious as we consider the design in nature by our Creator, we see that God Himself wants us to enjoy even sweet things, but there is no bad benefit to honey, which has a lower glycemic load, and rather than like sugar in the form that we get in sodas and pastries, causes a coagulation of the cholesterol and affects that synaptic cleft that we spoke of. Pure sugar has an adverse effect on our cholesterol, our arteries, our brain, but honey does just the opposite. It was created in such a way that it works very well with our body, where if we were going to indulge in sweets, this does not have the adverse effects that the sugar has. Are we recommending it in keto? Not necessarily. Great for transition, great for recovering your brain from stroke, unclogging your arteries as you work towards ketosis, and a number of other parallel protections that we find only in ketosis. They are in the enzymes and in the chemical constitution of honey.